Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Our today's lecture will be on classification of international institutions. This is a continuation from where we stopped last week in our course in 406 titled International Institutions. Under the classification of international institutions, our focus will be on number one, the classification based on number of members of that particular institution. Number two, we'll also look at the classification based on common history of the organizations. Number three, we'll also look at the classification based on geographical location. And then number four, we'll look at classification based on interest of the institutions. And then we'll conclude. International institutions can actually be classified based on their membership. For example, the United Nations and then the European Union are prominent examples of international institutions showcasing different member dynamics. The membership can be based on universality, and then it can be a limited membership. Under universal institutions, we can have the ones we mentioned, like the United Nations, which is open to nearly all sovereign countries. For example, Nigeria, which has been a member since 1960. And then there is also the World Health Organization, which supports global health initiatives, including polio eradication campaigns and many other things in Nigeria and African countries. These two organizations have opened their membership to nearly all sovereign countries except the ones that decide not to be part of it. Some organizations have limited membership. For example, the G7, composed of seven advanced economies. Nigeria, for instance, is not a member, but it interacts through summit with members of that country, and it can as well be invited to a discussion, although it is not a member. There is OPEC, for example, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which includes different countries such as Nigeria, which is one of the top oil producing nations globally. This is the second classification, which is by common history of the member countries. This can happen in two different situations. Number one, the colonial legacy of the institution, while number two is the historical political alliances. For the colonial legacy institutions, one of the major type of international institutions that we often point at is the Commonwealth of Nations. And Commonwealth of Nations fosters cooperation among member countries sharing a common history, promoting shared values such as democracy, human rights, and sustainable development. Countries that composed of this Commonwealth of Nations include Nigeria and other former British colonies like Kenya, Ghana, India, and many other countries that were once under the colonial control of the uh, the United Kingdom. Number two, the historical political alliances. Some countries, such as the Francophones, comprise countries with historic ties to France and French language, like Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire. The third classification is by geographical location. Some organizations have membership from two different geographical locations. One is regional organizations, and secondly, sub-regional organizations. Here, classification by geographical location refers to international institutions that serve specific regional interests, such as the African Union for Africa and ASEAN for Southeast Asian countries. Example, for the regional organizations, like we mentioned the AU, African Union, it has a focus on continental integration. It also participates in peacekeeping and then development operations in many other member countries. While the sub-regional organizations include, for instance, the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, which includes countries like Nigeria, Ghana, and many more countries working on trade, security, political stability. And then we have East African Community, EAC, which promotes economic cooperation among East African countries like Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. There is also SADC, That's the Southern African Development Community, which covers countries like South Africa, Zambia, and Malawi. Most of these institutions we are talking about, some of them have been the way they are regarding goal since inception, while some have experienced some form of transformation, such as, for example, the ECOWAS. ECOWAS was originally created or established as economic community of West African countries. Its major goal was to consider how it provides economic development, economic integration, and what have you in that regard. However, over the years, due to very many development, particularly political and security development, members of the ECOWAS realized that this economic development cannot be achieved without putting into consideration what politics and then what security can provide in terms of providing help towards development. And many other member countries have actually been in a serious security breach or crisis. So that's why now the activities of the ECOWAS has now transformed. It has transcended beyond the economic matter alone. ECOWAS is gradually becoming what we call a supranational institution. Now it caters for politics, security, economy, etc., etc. The fourth classification of international institution is classification by interest. International institutions like World Health Organization, IMF, and UNESCO serve specific interests, focusing on global health, financial stability, and education, respectively, each playing a crucial role in international cooperation. These are not the only international interests that are established based on certain interests. There are many more there. We only chose these ones for the sake of explanation in the class. Again, these areas of interest can actually fall, for example, under security and peacekeeping, food security issues, health issues, education development, socio-cultural, international dispute, economy and trade, human rights, international finance, regulatory and governance, and many more areas. For instance, under security and peacekeeping, we have organizations or institutions such as the United Nations, which participates in what? Peacekeeping missions in different countries, particularly in Africa and Asia. They are there in Mali. ECOWAS also standby force is also there. You get it as an institution which is established based on particular interests, particularly of that security and peacekeeping operation. We also have FAO, Nigerian National Food Security Program, which is, of course, an institution. You get it? That has a focus on food security, and then the education, UNESCO, Africa Virtual University, and many other organizations are there also catering for this interest. And then we also have like African Union Pan-African Cultural Congress, which is an example of an international institution working on socio-cultural dimension of member countries. And we also have International Court of Justice, ICJ, the African Court on Human Rights and People's Rights, which are example of international institutions working on international disputes. And then we have also World Trade Organization, African Continental Free Trade Area, which are also working on what? Economy and trade. And then we have UN Human Rights Council, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and many other human rights organizations which are actually dealing with human rights issues across the world. We have, for example, the World Bank again, African Development Bank, and IMF, and many more international financial institutions that are working on international finance. We have, for example, Financial Action Task Force. We have African Peer Review Mechanism, APRM. These two organizations are very important for our understanding. They actually work on establishing regulatory and governance mechanisms across the continent, across the continent. So these are the classifications we are talking about. You get it? And they are so simple for us to understand. This is where I will stop. Although it's a brief explanation, but anyone who is interested in exploring more should write his or her question on the platform so that we can take it from there and provide further discussion. Thank you very much.